Hello and welcome to another edition of Falmouth Cares Business Roundtable. I am your host, Troy Clarkson, and as always, we are very glad to have our panelists here from the Flying Bridge, Bill Zammer, our tech expert and statistician, Gary Vacon, and the president of the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce, Michael Kasperian. You know, for the last couple of months, we've had the pleasure of bringing to you a weekly show where we bring in leaders in the community and thought leaders and influencers to talk about the impact of the coronavirus on our community. And we've really had the opportunity to dig in to some depth about what those impacts have been and to really focus on important solutions. So for the last couple of months, we've had those discussions and we've realized that we've said just about all that can be said about that. And so we're going to go on a hiatus after today's show for a while. So today's show is to really wrap up what we've talked about for the last couple of months, to provide you a status update of where we see our community at, and to talk about how we might move forward into the future. And for those purposes, we thought there would be no better guest than the chair of our select board, Megan English Braga, who has joined us before, but really is, as the elected leader of our town government, here to help us pull it all together, talk about what we've seen, and really continue to provide you with not only information, but some good news on some of the really positive things that we've seen come out of this pandemic, particularly some of the decisions that Megan and her colleagues made that helped us really stay ahead of that curve and flatten that curve. So as always, Megan, welcome, and we look forward to chatting with you in a few minutes. But for starters, as always, and Gary, it has been not only a pleasure, but so important to have your perspective on this show for the last couple of months. And we really appreciate the research that you've done, but also your ability to take some pretty complex data and put it in a way that all of us can understand and absorb and make decisions on. So first, thank you for all the work you've done, and please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Troy. You got to enable screen sharing for me.
Got it.
All right, let's go. Here we go. All right, let's start with the usual disclaimers. The first disclaimer is this should say June 23rd. That's a typo on the slide, but this data is of June 23rd from the usual sources. Again, the testing data is somewhat limited. In the United States, we've tested 8.42% of the population. We're testing about 0.15% a day. Massachusetts, we've tested more, 11.23% of the population, 0.15% per day. Again, not a random sample. So statistical inferences are suspect. The corona growth factor has been interesting. In Massachusetts, we're down to like 0.1%. It's down to a trickle. It's very impressive. In the US has creeped up. It's the blue line, and you can see it. It's, you know, when you come down from like 20 and 30%, it doesn't look like a lot, but there is a big difference between 1% or 1.3%. That was 1% last week. It's creeping up, and it's creeping up in particular a number of states, and you've probably heard that news, and we're going to explore that in some detail. But we're doing really good in Massachusetts. Here's the daily case rate in Massachusetts, and I mean, this is incredibly dramatic. You see how far down that's going, and this is the number of daily tests we've done. So, I mean, this is, you know, amazing progress. Something we're doing is working, you know, we should be very happy about that. I think it's everybody's fine work. The hospitalization data in Massachusetts, we still have lots of net discharges, less than 1,000 people in the hospital with COVID now, and the death rate is down in Massachusetts. So all good Massachusetts news. Now let's talk about a little bit about what's going to happen next. So I'm going to look at the University of Washington model, which we've looked at every week, which is a forecast model. Notice that Massachusetts looks pretty good going forward. I mean, there's some creep up in death rate out in October, but nothing dramatic. But then I want to show you what their model shows you for the United States. It's quite a different picture. The United States, they're predicting that in October, we're going to have another surge that, you know, if you measure that uncertainty, there could be as large as the initial surge in a worst case. But it's certainly a significant surge. So let's explore that. Let's look at actual data, both the United States and the world, not forecast data, and where that currently stands. Here's the newly reported cases per day across the world. As you can see, there was an initial surge, but there also seems to be a secondary surge occurring across the world. And, you know, I mean, this is a significant number, 150,000 cases a day. This is across the world. So it's certainly not over universally across the world. Now let's look at the US. The US is having some indications of a second surge occurring now. But if we dig under that, I'll show you the same states that we looked at last week and show you what's been going on. We looked at Florida last week. Florida was growing at 2.6% last week. It's accelerated to 4% now. They're getting 4,000 cases a day roughly. That's 20 per 100,000. At our worst in Massachusetts, we're at 43 cases per 100,000. So that puts it in perspective. They're halfway to our worst, and at our worst days in Massachusetts, and they're climbing at an accelerating rate. Let's take a look at Texas. A similar story. They were at a 2.2% growth rate last week. They're at a 3.3% growth rate this week. So this is not only going up, but the rate that's going up is accelerating. And it's about 14 per 100,000. Again, we were at 43 per 100,000 at our worst. Arizona, probably the most significant in terms of 44 cases per 100,000. So they're about where we were when we were at our worst in Massachusetts. Right now, their growth rate is 5.5% and it's accelerating. We don't know where that stops. California, creeping up, right? It was at 1% last week, now 2.2%, 10 per 100,000, also creeping up. So what does this all mean? Okay, I have tried to, you know, throughout this, and given this is the last one in a while, I've tried to just present the data. This time I'm going to take about 2 or 3 minutes. And after having collected data for about 3 months, spent about an hour or two a day on this, I want to talk about what insights I think I have on this, which may or may not agree with yours or others. However, it's our last one, so I thought I'd do it. So here we go. First of all, I wanted to give a big thank you to the local businesses. Those of you who have started and run businesses, and I've done 2, in fact, started a 3rd one during the virus. I know that a business is a big part of you. You invest a tremendous amount of your personal energy, and it's almost like another child. It's something that you work so hard on. And I have watched in this town the largest percentage of businesses suffer through this with a minimum of complaint because they cared about their customers. These people are local heroes. We should do as much as we can to bring them business as we open up. You know, don't shop someplace else. Go to downtown Falmouth, go buy stuff in this town. These people deserve our support. I also wanted to shout out to Megan and local government. There were some decisions made early that felt scary, I'm sure, like deciding we weren't going to do the fireworks, we weren't going to do the road race. These are potential super spreader events. If you think back when those decisions were made, those decisions were not as clear as it is now. And to me, that is kind of a profile and courage kind of thing. It's really dramatic. And I want to just say thank you to our local government officials that made those decisions for our safety. And then finally, state government. You know, I think Governor Vacon has done a great job of managing this and managing the risk and trying to up the testing. And, you know, just to be very clear, absent from the slide is federal government, and that was not an accident. On that topic, I want to talk about the virus itself. The virus, I don't know how else to say this, but the virus is not partisan. It's just a strand of RNA in a sheath. It doesn't have a single neuron. It has no political party. It doesn't watch Fox or MSNBC. It doesn't reproduce without us. It's not even that alive. It needs us to be alive. It has no intent, and it responds to what we do collectively. And it doesn't know about your civil liberties. And it doesn't just go away. The evidence is pretty strong that it's not just going away. We may have done very well managing it here, but that's not true across the rest of the country or the world. And let's talk about what I think I've learned from this is that, hey, Massachusetts is doing really well on COVID. USA and the rest of the world, not so much. Herd immunity, we've talked about this at multiple times. The data does not support large-scale herd immunity. In Sweden, where they just let it fly, Herd immunity is about 7%. In New York City, it's about 20%. You need 60, 70% herd immunity in order to stop the virus. So it isn't here. And we've learned that behavior can control it. Masks, hygiene, isolation, testing and tracing to manage it. And testing and tracing in other countries is far more advanced than ours in many countries. And there's some place where I'd like to fault the federal government. In terms of the economy, we've learned something else too. Our supply chain is incredibly fragile. You went to the supermarket during this and you saw empty shelves. And things really didn't get that bad, but they could have. It could have gotten worse. If you completely ignore the economy, it could. Employment is fragile. Look at the unemployment rate. Social systems are fragile. Essential workers are vulnerable, and the Cape economy is particularly vulnerable. If you don't balance these two concerns, you don't do the right thing. If the supply chain totally dries up, you're not going to eat. If everybody gets sick, life isn't going to be very good either. But I have optimism, and this is why. I think that the curve looks like this, and this curve has no units on it because this is kind of a curve that, I don't know, those of you who took Economy 101, they drew a pile of curves on the board, and none of them had units marked on either the curve. But this is what I think. I think that there is a balance point between total lockdown and wide open that we can find where both the economy and health can both thrive. And I think it's possible, and I think we're approaching it. It's going to involve, maybe you're going to have to wear a mask some places where it's crowded. Maybe we're not going to be able to have Mardi Gras like mosh pits, but we're going to be able to do a lot. We're going to be able to keep going. So I believe that. I believe we can find that point. I believe we're trying to find that point by gradually opening up and listening to the data and responding to the data like it matters. So anyway, end of editorial. I'll hand it back to the crowd.
Gary, thank you so much. And I think in addition to the very valuable data that you provided to show that Massachusetts and Falmouth got it right during this pandemic, you raise a really important point. Around this virtual table for the last couple of months, we have people with very different life backgrounds. We have views all over the political spectrum, but we've been able to come together every week and bring on guests that focused on the pandemic, on the solutions, and on public health, whatever our political leanings were. And so that's so critically important that you raise that point, because this roundtable proves that we can have varying views, but be committed to doing the right thing. And Megan, that's why it's so important that you're here this week, because Gary is correct. Some of the decisions you and the select board made early on in this pandemic were difficult decisions. They weren't the easiest decisions, but you made them. And in real time, we were able to discuss them on the show and really develop consensus. Some of the people affected by those decisions, Jennifer Edwards from the road race came on here, but jumped on and praised the town for making the difficult, but she believed necessary decision about the road race. And so I think because we have the ability to collaborate and to communicate, some very difficult decisions have nonetheless generally, I think, garnered pretty significant public support, because Gary's data proves that although difficult, what we've done is the right thing. So Megan, first of all, again, thanks to you and your leadership for really helping flatten the curve locally, and thanks for being willing to come on here and talk about it.
Thank you, Troy. Yeah, I just want to pick up on something that Gary said when he's sort of breaking down, state, local, federal government. I think, and the folks that are in this group here all have really excellent experience with this. But, I think the further you get away from local government, the further you get away from those one-on-one connections that help boards, select boards and individuals make decisions, whether it's Republican or Democrat. When you get to the national level, our representatives are pretty removed from us. It's just part of the nature of how that representation works. They have larger districts. They're covering more communities. Local government is about as personal as it gets. I mean, there's no hiding when you're a member of a select board or you're a town manager even. There's no hiding. You're in the grocery store, and the folks at your making decisions about and with, or, you know, in aisle 8 getting cereal with you. So I think that, you know, while it sometimes can be very challenging, because, you know, you are going to, some decision you make is going to impact somebody that you care about, and maybe not in a way that they feel is positive. But I think having those connections, having that very direct input helps you to make better decisions, because you are not thinking about it at the 30,000 foot level. It's not theoretical. It's not academic. It's very personal. It's very real. And you are trying to balance, in this particular situation, really balancing exactly that kind of graph that Gary was showing. You know, how do we save and support our economy in town at the same time as making sure that this does not become a public health crisis that is so far out of control that, you know, it doesn't help our economy, it doesn't help anyone. And we, you know, really as a board tried to find that balance, weighed heavily on our health agent, who has been tremendous throughout this, and on, you know, data that we received obviously from the state, from the CDC, but really taking that micro look at what was happening right here in Falmouth, and you know, how could we really best address those needs. And so that has, you know, I think it's both the benefit and the curse sometimes of local government, that it, you know, the beauty of it is that you're not removed. You're making decisions that impact you, that impact the people you care about, your family and your neighbors. And I actually think it, you know, at the end of the day, if you do it right, it's a better and sort of more effective model than as we kind of get further and further out, because you just, it's hard to make those macro decisions and do them well, because every community is really so different. I think you've had the benefit of having lots of feedback from individuals. Falmouth is definitely a community where people don't hold back. They share their thoughts, they share their opinions and concerns, and that's always to the benefit of decision makers.
Absolutely, 100%. You know, early in this process, when we began the show, we all, particularly Gary, talked about this concept of the hammer in the dance. And you know, back in March, when we were just beginning to understand how profound the impact of this pandemic would be, we talked about the fact that the steps that were taken early on would really set the stage, be the foundation for what we would be able to do later. And not just here in Falmouth and not just in Massachusetts, but globally, lots of people expressed skepticism. And you know, those public health experts and our own Gary Vacon were right. So those steps that we took, and Megan, the steps specifically that your board took early on, are now allowing us for the gradual opening that we're seeing now. And as we're seeing, you know, in the rest of the United States, consistent with those stats that Gary showed, those states that didn't rely on the science, and unfortunately in some cases made it a partisan virus, are now seeing those impacts. And so, you know, I think it really underscores the importance of and the value of the conversations that we've all had, so that, and the public didn't understand that importance just because they watched the show, but certainly the dialogue was part of, I think, an overall deeper understanding in our community about the importance of social distancing and of hand washing, and of all the things that people have done to stop the spread. One of the other things we talked about is the concept of how will we. Very early on, that was the theme of a couple of our shows. And now we're into that how will we phase. And so I'm going to throw it out to the panel, particularly Bill and Michael, representing the business community, because now we have to continue to answer that question moving forward. Since we're going to go on hiatus for a while and just really see how things progress, that's a really important question for Michael, you as the leader of the Chamber of Commerce, and Bill as one of the leading business people in town. You know, how do we progress? How do we go from here? And how are things unfolding as we transition from being shut down to outdoor dining to limited indoor dining? So I'll throw it to you guys really for an update, and take out your crystal ball and tell us how things are going to progress.
Go ahead, Mike.
Really, I usually defer to my elder statesman, but fine. So So I think, you know, looking back, a lot of what Gary talked about and Megan as well, I think we learned a lot from this. I think one of the things that is probably the most important that I've learned is that we need to have better communication, I think, amongst everybody. I think it was really challenging. A lot of the initiatives, you know, we tried to get behind. We found that a lot of our constituent members didn't agree on certain things, and it was really challenging. And things kind of progressed along. And now that we're reopened, I think it's you know, the jury's out. I think it's going to be very challenging summer, you know, based on the phone calls we're getting and the people requesting information. I think people are coming here. We are going to have a summer season. And as I've said all along from the beginning of this program, just by the very fact that the summer residents, many of which who are already here, that's that many more folks in town, they're going to be supporting our local businesses. You know, whether they're going to be able to make the revenue they need to make the profit they need, et cetera, to continue on is still, you know, set to be seen. But, you know, going forward, I think there's going to have to be that careful balance. And I think Gary hit it, you know, on the head with that whole equilibrium. You know, we have to find a way to keep businesses open and still keep people safe. So the message, and again, back to communication, is really important. You know, wearing masks and following the guidance of the CDC, following the guidance of, you know, the government, et cetera, but also with the flexibility of allowing people, you know, to run their businesses in a capacity that can prove at least they can survive this and grow another day. I think at this point, it's going to be critical that businesses are able to get through the summer, can get as much business in as possible, and then, you know, then obviously get through the winter, and then hopefully by next summer there'll be a vaccine, or this virus will no longer be something we have to contend with. But there's a lot to be learned, you know, from the supply chains to everything. It's been a huge learning curve from the beginning to now. I think we'll be better prepared next time it comes out. But again, best practices, I don't think we can just totally relax. We've talked about, you know, several times on the show, you know, where, you know, we'd see people without masks on, et cetera. Gary's numbers are really encouraging. It's really good to see that in Massachusetts we are so low. That's the message we continue to give people who call here on a continual basis on whether or not, you know, we're open, what's going on. We're like, yes, we are open. Come on down. These are, you know, you have to bring a mask. Restaurants are open. Now we've moved into some indoor dining. Stores are open. I'm hopeful. I think it'll work out. And I really do believe people will shop local and support our local businesses. We are that kind of community. You know, Megan's right. Everybody's running into each other at the cereal aisle, right? There's 2 degrees of separation in Falmouth. And I think that's one thing our community has that some of the larger communities don't have, is that people are really supporting each other. You know, that came evident in town meeting the other night, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, some of those items, as well as the support that has come out from residents that want to support businesses, and our local nonprofit groups who've continued to help those people who've been disadvantaged by being unemployed or underemployed. So I'm very hopeful it's going to all work out very well. And now I'll defer to Bill.
Hi. I can't believe it's been March. It's been months we've been doing this. It just dawned on me.
Long time.
Yeah.
You know, we were at the forefront of talking about various issues, and whether it's liability problems or PPP and a number of those things. So as we go forward now, you know, what am I looking for, and my concerns? And I guess my concern, this isn't over. I'm getting this feeling that people think that this is done or something. There are people, you know, who just shouldn't be going out to places and doing things and not doing the proper hand washing and the masks and things like that. It's insanity in my mind that they're not doing this stuff. I've been my restaurants, I cannot believe how busy we've been. It blew my mind. My wife and I, and I guess Gary and I were both wrong on this one. We said, who's going to go out? The place has been packed. We've got an hour and a half.
Right.
You were right, Mr. Kasperian. So, but as you go forward with it now, you know, we're busy. We've been very fortunate. Everyone's been behaving themselves. They called me recently about the Cape Cod Times. They wanted to find out, or the Enterprise, find out if patrons were being, you know, not listening to the advice of the proprietors and stuff. But we've been very fortunate. They're listening to us. They're paying attention. They're doing what they're supposed to do. So that's good. If they continue doing that, we're fine. We've got spacing on the tables in all the restaurants. We know what we're doing. I mean, the question now becomes: are people going to, go out, and will they go out, and then are we able to staff the whole thing? And I think that
That's the bigger problem, Bill, right there. You're absolutely right. The staffing, I think, is more of the issue than the patrons. I think people will come out, but I know there's been some challenges in getting people to come to work.
there's a big disconnect as to what we're doing as far as do you really staff up? You don't know what business you're going to have. So the question is, you don't want to overstaff. Megan was talking about, I guess your sister has one of the hotels. You don't know how many rooms you're going to be using, so it's crazy.
Right.
It's just I got a delivery coming to the door. This is crazy. I got somebody coming to the door. But I think that right now that my feeling is that they really mind yourselves in terms of what's going on, and not go crazy with stuff. But let me turn it over to Troy for a moment. I'm going to step out for a moment.
Sure. Can I add a couple things to
Of course,
that?
yeah, please.
So, in talking about what we learned, I think there's a couple of things that, and back to Megan's point about being 30,000 feet above the air, there were a lot of good things that came out of this. And there were a lot of things I think that we've learned from that can be rethought. For example, the PPP, that was a good thing for many, many businesses, but it wasn't for others. Again, and I've said from the beginning, here's the SBA, $50 billion a year is what they normally lend, and they were asked to lend $350 billion in a matter of 2 weeks. But a lot of businesses got left behind who needed that money. And again, I'll make the pitch again, like 501c6s, chambers of commerce were left behind. And we bore a lot of the work in getting the information out and getting out to not only to our members, we were a member organization. We embraced all businesses and worked on their behalf. But then there were businesses who were operating pretty much normal. And they were able to take advantage of 8 weeks' pay for their employees who were going to work anyway. So it was like getting an 8-week bonus for those business owners that, to me, seems a little unfair. When there were other businesses that, had to shut down and they couldn't afford to keep their people. So I think that's going to be rethought. And then also the one thing that Bill has talked about before, and we've discussed on the show, was the bonus that was given to unemployment, although I understand people need it, but it almost worked as a disadvantage when recalling people back to work, when we heard many of our businesses say, many, not just Bill. I heard this from dozens of our members say, we call people back to work and they said, I'm making more money at home on unemployment with the $600 bonus. So yeah, we look at it, we threw a lot of money at the problem, the government did, but was it really, was it really thought out? And again, to the money was sent out to all the families. There were a lot of families that didn't lose work that were getting that bonus. Maybe it could have been thought out for maybe lower income people or people who were, out of work, et cetera. So I'm hoping that on a national level, this is going to really be looked at and thought, that if this happens again, that money can be spent more wisely and go deeper to the people that need it.
Well, that's a valid point, because as we sit around this virtual table, the Senate appears ready to at least discuss and debate that next phase of potential funding. And I think this, based on my understanding of it anyway, this will provide more direct aid to local communities, many of whom have had to tighten their budgets and lay people off. But I think you raise a good point, Michael, and it really goes back to the point Megan made earlier, and that is that local government has direct contact with the people it serves. And state and federal and even county are a couple of levels removed. And so you don't see the impact of your decisions. And so I think feedback like yours is critically important, because as we know, our Congressman Bill Keating watches this show and takes back the feedback to his work and moving legislation forward. So it's important. Megan, are you getting similar feedback from folks? And I think the whole issue of employees and finding people to work is one that continues to be a theme.
Yes, an enormous challenge. And I think Bill raises a great point that in addition to it being difficult to find staff, it's also difficult to know, how to staff, because no one's ever been in this paradigm before. So we don't know, are you staffing at 50%, 75, I mean, 100, what's the right number? And there are finite, number of individuals for these positions, particularly, when we don't have as many folks coming through with seasonal work visas. So, we are limited, and, we have both the challenge of being in an area that is, we're fairly isolated. We're not connected like a Metro West area would be, where we can draw from a lot of other communities for workers. And, we certainly, I think, a lot of employers are reeling from not being able to be open for several months, and they're trying to, I think, strike that balance. So I'm hearing from a lot of business owners that that's a huge challenge. I think one of the other challenges is also that, there are, as Bill noted, there's a number of regulations, and I can just say from the town government perspective, when Governor Baker set down all of the regulations to sort of, ease some of the restrictions around alcohol licensing and permitting for restaurants to have outdoor seating. He didn't erase them, but there's been this challenge between, following what the governor put in place, but also, I'll use one specific example. The governor's orders said that, you couldn't use any kind of pager system. So, we have restaurants in town where you get your order, you take a little buzzer and you hold on to it until it buzzes and you pick up your order. That's not allowed at all under the governor's orders. That would put some of our businesses in a very hard spot, possibly not being able to open, because that's the type of system they've operated with for years. And so as a town government, we have to strike a balance between sort of the letter of the law that the governor has given us that we're bound by, and also really recognizing that some of these requirements would be onerous or impossible for some businesses. And I can just say, essentially, the way we looked at it was, if a permit was pending and the business is open before the permits were fully approved, we were pretty comfortable with that, because we understand that those businesses were in the process and they had submitted their paperwork. And again, it hasn't been without some bumps in the road. The town has also never, our town staff has also never been down this road before in terms of trying to process the volume of applications for businesses, and each business is so unique and different. So I agree with Mike that we can, really learn from this and hopefully have better process when we go forward, because we know we'll have, whether it's this or some other challenge, there'll be something else that we're confronted with. But, when we have a moment to reflect, I think we can really look at process and how we can do better as a town government to really try to support, again, both the public health piece, which I think we've done. If I give us a high grade, the highest grade, anywhere, I think goes to that piece of it. We did make some decisions that weren't popular, but really it was based on the fact that I think everyone on that board and everyone who was part of that conversation believed that a healthy economy is based on a healthy population. If people are not healthy and they're concerned, they're not going to go. Every businesses could be wide open. They're not going to go out. You're going to have a handful of people who will, but particularly with our demographic, we trend a little bit older here in Falmouth, and some of those, the older you get with this particular virus, in general, although we're seeing it's certainly poses a risk to folks of all age, but it's a higher risk for a lot of older folks. And so if we didn't, feel comfortable that we had it under control, businesses are going to suffer. And so we really believe that if we could, on the public health perspective, really tighten things up, that ultimately would help with the economic outcome. So I think, we can definitely learn and improve with how we communicate with businesses. And, that'll be the goal going forward, because it's correct. Like Bill says, it's not over, and we're still, we don't know what other, we may get other directives from the state as time goes on, if there's another bump and another spot.
Megan, you're certainly speaking, I think, for both the residents of Falmouth as well as the business community. And I'm proud of the way you're looking at this. It's not just one-sided, and I think that your fellow select people are doing pretty much the same. And realizing you do have a lot of regulations to put up with, and you just can't subvert them just to go around them. You've got to either change them at some point, but right now you have to live with them. But I've got a question, a little bit change of subject, if you don't mind, which is of great concern to the business community as well. And that's what's happening with the, I guess, a town meeting, with the whole situation with the public service folks, the police department, and what's going to happen there. And can we get your thoughts on that a little bit while we have a few moments?
Sure. So we had town meeting on Monday, and it was our first ever, for the town of Falmouth anyway, outdoor town meeting. We had, it was really, you know, a huge effort, and big thanks to, pardon?
Good thing it didn't rain.
Yes, and that was actually really, if anyone saw it, I had a ridiculous sun hat on because in the beginning it was blazing sun. But we were actually really fortunate with the weather. It definitely cooperated. But, you know, all things, you know, being equal, I think it was really, it went off without a hitch. We just did the budget and we did a couple financial articles. We'll reserve all of the rest of the warrant articles for a later date, but we know we wanted to kind of get in under the line for the end of the fiscal year, approve our budget. And one of the things was obviously the budget for the police department. And really kind of the day of town meeting, a proposed amendment to the budget for the police department was circulated to some town meeting members. And it was initially starting with a proposal to defund the police budget by 10%. Then by the time town meeting rolled around, it had turned into looking to have one of the two new positions we were funding in that budget be for someone to do affirmative action work within the police department and the town. And ultimately what ended up happening is that Doug Jones, who's obviously a member of the select board, he made an amendment to the amendment and asked that that position for an affirmative action officer be created, but from free cash. So the budget for the Falmouth Police Department was passed by town meeting as had been presented in the original budget proposal for the upcoming year. And so there will be no decrease in the, you know, the public safety services that the town now gets. And in fact, there are going to be 2 new paid positions for officers. The challenge there being that it is difficult to fill positions. Not as many folks want to go into public safety as they used to. It is also more difficult when you are on Cape Cod, because living here is, as we all know, you know, pretty expensive. So on an entry-level salary for a police officer, it's, you know, it's a challenge. And then the last part is related to the coronavirus, which is that the coronavirus has slowed down police academies. And so we are trying to catch up, but those positions will be funded and filled as we can go forward. So town meeting, I think, you know, really the commitment they made was both to public safety and a recognition that our police department, you know, every department in any town, any department in any business can obviously be improved. But our police department, I think, you know, just has done a really remarkable job. They definitely embrace a community policing model. You hear about that model being talked about all across, you know, the country, and we really have that model here in Falmouth. We have a lot of contact with our police officers. Our chief is at pretty much every event, even when those events are protesting around issues related to the police. He's there. He's in dialogue with organizations. He's regularly meeting with No Place for Hate, who really tries to look at issues of racism and bias. And he has been on the forefront of putting, you know, he's a wonderful pamphlet that he puts together for education around how our police department deals with issues of immigration, and recognizing that our particular police department stays sort of, I'll just say stays in its lane and does what it's supposed to do. And they enforce, you know, they enforce and make sure they address criminal matters here, but they don't go off on a tangent and try to enforce, you know, around issues of immigration. And he's tried to reach out to the community of immigrants here in Falmouth to make sure that they feel comfortable. So if they are a victim of a crime or have information about a crime, they know they can come to the police and communicate with them. So he's really done a wonderful job. He has officers that he sends out when someone overdoses. He sends an officer out to that person's residence to try and speak with them and their family to encourage them to get into treatment. Same thing where we have issues of mental health. He tries to reach out. Sometimes they have to section someone through the courts rather than looking at it as a criminal matter, looking at it as a mental health matter. And so I think what town meeting recognized was that we've asked police to do a lot, more than what they're trained to do. We've asked them to really become social workers on top of being police officers. And training, while it is shifting in some ways, the training that they receive is not to be a social worker. It's to work in law enforcement. And those two things haven't caught up yet. But so much of what they do deals around issues of mental health and substance abuse. And then, of course, when we look at the discussion that we're having nationally about issues around racism and bias in policing, I think what town meeting did was support our police department and acknowledge that there's no community that's free of racism or bias. It's impossible. It's not part of human nature to be free of all of those things. And having somebody who is an affirmative action officer to really work proactively rather than just dealing with problems when they arise, to proactively, as Dr. George Spivey used to do within the school and the town system, to put that back in place. And so it was, I think, an excellent outcome. I think everyone got fired up because, at first when you hear about defunding the police department by 10%, which would have been, I think, around a little over $600,000, that's a lot. But certainly we had a good outcome.
Megan, 25 years ago, when I first had the Flying Bridge, it was 26 years ago, whatever, I brought in the first group of my guest workers from Jamaica. And it was the first folks that came. I had 6 people I brought in, and they had gotten settled in. And after we got them settled in, they were going to go explore a little bit and go. They were heading towards the Walmart Plaza to get some stuff, the personal needs. And they were stopped by the police and questioned, and all kinds of stuff. And then they called me who they were and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there was no question. There was, who are these 6 black people in Falmouth? And today, the folks I have coming in from Jamaica, all the people are invited to their homes. They're all friendly. They all know each other. It's a whole different thing. We've made such tremendous progress. It's a shame the world doesn't see that the progress is made. And I think Falmouth has been right there with being that way. It's a shame. But we have made progress, and obviously we need more, but it's there. So what you're doing, and the police department today is doing the right thing. I mean, they're great guys. So
yeah, they really are. I'll just say that if it weren't for H-2B visa program, that exact time frame that you're talking about, my son, who is the child of 2 Jamaican H-2B visa workers, wouldn't be living with me and be my son. So
really?
I think that it's brought so many riches to our community. And but we can always improve on that, and we can always build on that. But I think that the vote on Monday recognized the work that our police department has done, and the positive things that they've done. And it also recognized that we can always do better and improve. And I think everyone came away feeling, for the most part, probably 98% of the folks who voted that night felt very good with the outcome. It was a very strong vote in favor of it.
I think you're right, and I think you're right. And I'll tell you, I was one of those town meeting members that received that email the night before. I was very concerned about that. And, I can't speak highly enough of Chief Dunn either. As you know, he sits on the board of directors of the chamber. It's the first time we've had a police officer on the board, and he's provided invaluable feedback to the other directors on a monthly basis of what's going on. It's been really pro-business and really supportive. And his question, what I love about the chief is, how can we get it done? He was instrumental in helping the Falmouth Village Association and the chamber pull off the first stroll. In the past, we've tried to do that. And he's like, yeah, how do we get it done? And then the coordination has been, pretty amazing. When that vote was going on, the First Amendment and all, I do have to say it was very interesting. I did vote for it, and I was a big supporter of it, and I was so glad to see it happen. But the nice thing about the type of government we have is, Joe Netto, town meeting member, got up and he questioned creating a position out of free cash. Mm-hmm. And from a business perspective, I'm a businessman by profession and career. I said, he's making a lot of sense. Do we really take this position and fund it out of free cash? But I think there was such an overwhelming support and acknowledgement that something had to be done now, and that it was the right thing to do, that the community did come together. And I think they did that after really thinking hard about what Joe said. And I don't think that his thoughts or sentiments went away. I think in the future it'll be harder to do something like that. But I think next time it'll be in the budget. And I agree with you, Megan. I think the right thing happened for everybody. And I think you're right. I might push your 98 up to 99% of the people walked off that field. And I do have to say, you did look like a socialite with that hat. It's really good.
It was pretty ridiculous, but it was extremely helpful.
You look like,
because that,
you look
that
like
sun was
Jackie
intense.
O at the beach.
I just needed my mint julep is what I needed.
Yeah, right.
Troy, Troy,
Well,
what are you doing Tuesday?
off camera, I can tell a story about town meeting and cocktails, but that's for a different.
I'll bet you can.
From a different era. Let me just say that. Back in the days when Bill.
What are you doing on Tuesday now?
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second, but I did want to just draw together the conversation we just had about town meeting and the work that we've done on this show, because they are related very much so, in the sense that what we've been able to do on this show and what town meeting was able to do this week was rise above the din, right? In this world of tweets and 140 characters and Facebook posts, we've been trained to minimize complex issues to 140 characters.
Right.
Issues of race in our society are not that simple, and the issues of the impact of the coronavirus are not that simple, right? And so there are people who would like these things to be a binary choice. Either you support the business community or you wear a mask. Either you support law enforcement or you support law enforcement reform. Those are not binary choices. And by actually being open-minded enough to talk and listen and have a sophisticated discussion, we can really come up with some solutions that benefit the community. And I think that's what has happened locally and in the Commonwealth related to the impact of the coronavirus. And that is most certainly what happened Monday night, where there were people all over the map philosophically, but they got it right, I would say. And they were able to say, we support law enforcement and we recognize that racism is an issue in our nation and in our community, and we need to do something about it now. And boy, that was, I think, one of the finer moments I've seen in a very long time, because not only did they, I think, in that singular issue, do the right thing, but they got there the right way by being respectful, listening, and people sharing their thoughts. And that's so important. And that's, I think, the enduring value of the conversations that we've had here on the show, that people can look back on and see that not everybody that's been on the show agreed. And in fact, the four panelists here have presented a wide variety of views, but we do it in a way that tries to add value to the dialogue. And Megan, you deserve a lot of credit, because our leaders set the stage for that. And you and your board members have made a concerted effort, and that's not always been the case on that board, to, despite the fact that you may have disagreements, to work together and present a professional and cordial board for the public. And that's just so important. So, I think that the discussion of what happened at town meeting directly relates to what we've been able to do locally with the coronavirus as well.
Yeah, if I can, Troy, just, I think, this is what makes sort of a community run, right? When people care enough, like you guys do, to, everybody's busy, but to get together and do this each week, bring insight, bring conversation, even disparate views, but that people can, really flesh out in a civil way, in a constructive way. That's what makes, I think, Falmouth a very unique place, that people care enough to take their time to do it. It's the same thing with town meeting. It's a messy process. It's not an easy thing. But town meeting members really come, and for the vast majority, they come with their homework done. They come ready to have dialogue. We have had over the years, I don't need to tell you, you've been going longer than I have, but we've had very tough debates, very hard issues that people have come from different ends of the spectrum on. But generally, at the end of the day, when the vote is taken, that's where it is. And the same is true for this current board. I mean, the members that I have the privilege to serve with are, each one of them is so dedicated. They just put the work in and they really care. Everybody kind of cares or has a passion for something different, but, they come ready to argue their point. And once the board votes, that's the vote of the board, and nobody's trying to undermine it. And we respect that process. And so I I think that, I can't say enough throughout all of this. I think that just the strength of the Falmouth community has just shown so brightly. And, obviously there are places where we can improve, but I'm just so proud of everything that the town has done and the work that you guys have done to really help folks understand what's happening.
Well, thank you. And, back in March, when we literally were just sitting around a virtual table having a conversation about what was going on, I don't think we could have imagined that several months later we'd still be here having an extension of that initial conversation. But it literally grew from just a few friends getting together, chatting about how the pandemic was impacting our communities, our friends. And as I said on the first show, the impacts were for people who work in local business, people who own local business, or people who patronize local business. And that's just about everybody in our community. So we've all been impacted by this pandemic, and the work that we've done, I think, has helped people identify with it and realize that they're not alone. And I'm very grateful, and I mean this, fellas, for you being here week in and week out and sharing that, because Megan's right, we're all very busy, but we took the time because Falmouth cares. And so early on, someone, and I don't remember who, came up with the slogan "Falmouth cares," and then Gary went to a friend who was a talented graphic artist that came up with this logo that you see behind us. And as typically, in fact, almost always happens in Falmouth, somebody has a good idea and we turn it into a way to benefit the community. And so Bill and Linda stepped up, and Bill grabbed his friend Sam LaRusso, and he and his wife Judy purchased 1,000 t-shirts with this logo on it. As you know, Megan, I know you own one. And we sold them, and all of the proceeds have gone to benefit Belonging to Each Other, a local homeless nonprofit, and the Falmouth Service Center. And we needed to figure out how we're going to get these t-shirts to people at a safe, socially distant way. And the folks from Belonging to Each Other put a retail store on their website, and Bill stepped up, and his staff at the Flying Bridge became a shipping center. Bill absorbed all of the postal costs, and there's almost 1,000 people walking around our community with these t-shirts. And that's important not only because it benefits those local charities, but it's allowed us to show solidarity. And when I see someone walking down the street and I'm wearing one of those t-shirts and they're wearing one, I may not know them, but we wave at each other. And that's been a great way for people to come together. So next Monday, right, Michael?
Yes, Monday. This Monday, yeah.
Monday.
Monday.
I will be actually, there's this annual tradition that I read the Declaration of Independence with Bob Haskell at the Museums on the Green. And after we do that, we will be gathering to present 2 checks for $5,500 a piece each to Belonging to Each Other and the Falmouth Service Center. And
What time?
From the Zammers will be there about 9:15. Bill and Linda will be there, and hopefully we'll have the LaRussos there. And I know Michael and Gary will be there. Megan, you're welcome to come as well. And really that event is a celebration of how this community comes together in difficult times. And that's what we've seen, not just with Falmouth Cares, but in the community in general. And these discussions that we've had are important, but that portion of the work that so many people have been the part of are even more important, because Falmouth cares, but that's because Falmouth comes together.
All right.
So great job, fellas, for being part of it. Bill, especially thanks to you and Linda, and for getting the LaRussos on board to put this forward. Gary, thanks to you for helping get the logo out there. And it's been wonderful to be part of something so positive.
Jennifer Washburn on the logo.
Thank you.
Great marketing person, by the way.
And Gary, having all those banners printed too and put all over the town, that's very positive everywhere. Yeah.
I think, keeping spirits up and really just building on that connectivity is huge. I mean, those things, they're not, it's not just symbolic. It really means something. And then when you point out the actual, financial contribution it's going to make to two of, we have great organizations in Falmouth, but those two really stand out as just absolute pillars in what they do. And the fact that they, get much needed resources of many, many, many kinds right to the people who need them most. And this is certainly a time when more people are in need, than would normally be the case. So that's just tremendous. What a great thing. And we would love if someone wants to maybe come on for our selectmen's meeting on July 13th to maybe announce that. So the larger community knows what you guys have done. If someone's comfortable with that, we can talk about it later, but we'd love for the community to hear about those donations.
Sure.
I tend to be a little camera shy, but I could
Oh,
probably.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Count
You
him
can
in.
hold your hand.
Count Troy in.
So this is not goodbye. We're going to put the show on hiatus only because I think we've covered a really wide swath of information, and we want the shows that we've done to be a resource for the community on an ongoing basis. I know, Gary, you're committed that, if we see a change that really warrants discussion, we'll come right back on and produce another show. But we really want people to be able to have all of the shows that we've produced to be an ongoing resource. And I said it at the beginning, but Gary, particularly you, thank you for all the work that you've done, because there's some pretty complex data that we go over every week, but you put it in a way that everybody can understand. We're not epidemiologists, we're not scientists, but we've been able to have a conversation with you because you took the time to really put this in a form that people could understand. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Troy. It's been fun. And, I have lived a number of places in my life, but this is my hometown.
That's great to hear. And so as we close, Bill, Michael, any parting thoughts?
No, it's been fun. Move on. Hope we do it again sometime.
Yeah, it's been great. Send feedback. It's been a great learning experience, really, for me, and to be able to share, it's been wonderful. So, and Falmouth cares.
Yep.
Amen to that. Megan, especially to you, thank you so much for your leadership and for taking the time to come on and share your thoughts and really demonstrate to the people that watch the show that the local government and the local business community are working together to try to move things forward. So really, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks to all that you guys have done. And we certainly will continue to work harder and improve. And I say this all the time. We love the criticism because you learn the most. You feel good when people praise you, but you don't learn from praise. You really learn from criticism. So, we want to hear from folks about what we can do better and how we can improve. And, that is really helpful to us. So I hope that people keep that feedback coming through, however, whether it's directly to us or through the chamber, but we want to continue to hear that.
Well, and thank you, because I believe as someone who's been involved in local government for a very long time, the best local official is one that remains teachable. And you know what? And I know you believe this, Megan. When we think we know it all, then we're in trouble.
Yes.
So thank you for remaining teachable. And to all of you watching, thank you for every week joining us and helping us learn. And every week has been really a new learning experience. And the guests we've had on, thank you to all of them, from our congressman to Megan, to our new Senator Sue Moran, to some folks from the medical community and the Restaurant Association, and I could list them all. I mean, we have had the mosaic of our community to provide you with information and opinions on how things are unfolding. So that's it for now, but that's not it forever. We really appreciate you joining us here every week, and when the time is right, we will come back because Falmouth cares. Be safe, and we'll see you soon.
Right.
The Falmouth bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of our town, or an April dawn? Who knows if we shall meet again places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In